right. Well, hey, if you have your Bibles, we're going to be in John chapter 15. Again, I invite you to turn there. This Sunday, we're going to continue hanging out in this chapter. We've spent the last 3 weeks examining the first 17 verses of John chapter 15, talking about the abiding life. And if you've missed those sermons, I just encourage you to go back on the church YouTube channel and you can watch those services. Shri took week 1. In week 2, I preached. And then last week, we heard from Pastor Mary in week 3. And this week, I want to talk a little bit more about this rich teaching of Jesus and share a few things that the Lord's kind of taught me personally. He's been speaking to me about this section of verses this past month as we've been diving into this. And next week, let me give you a little tease here. Next week, what I plan to do, we'll see how it works out, but what I plan to do is look at the remaining verses of John 15, because I believe that it could be a timely word for some believers. Because if you read ahead, in the rest of this chapter, it's interesting. Jesus goes from teaching about abiding to teaching how the world's going to hate you. It's kind of fun. And so if you're a friend of Jesus, you might just be an enemy of this world. And so I feel like the Lord's kind of given me some things there, stewing on that, some thoughts about that. So come back next week. We'll plan to talk about that. So, hey, like we've done each week so far in this series, here's what I want to do. I want us to read these first 17 verses of this chapter. And so would you please stand with me in honor of God's word as I read this, encourage you to follow along. Jesus is speaking, and he says this. He says, "I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit so that they produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Remain," or some translations say the word abide, right? So when you see remain, think abide. So Jesus says, "Abide in me and I will remain," or abide in you. "For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine and you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned. But if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want and it will be granted. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. This brings great glory to my Father. I have loved you even as the Father has loved me. Remain in my love. When you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you these things so that you will be filled with my joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay one's life down for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you slaves because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends since I have told you everything the Father has told me. You didn't choose me, I chose you. I appointed you to go and to produce lasting fruit so that my Father will give you whatever you ask for using my name. This is my command. Love each other." Before you're seated, here's what I want you to do. If you know it, I want you to share with somebody around you the name of your great-grandparents. Okay, think about that. The name of your great-grandparents, think about that. If you know it, share it with your neighbor before you're seated. After you do that, you can take a seat. If you don't know, just say, "I don't know." All right, I'm just curious, now that I've asked the question, I'm just curious, how many of you actually knew the names of your great-grandparents? Just show of hands. Wow, that's impressive. All right. According to surveys, most people can't remember the names of any of their ancestors past their grandparents. So most people don't remember their great-grandparents' names. So you guys have done well to know that. Anyways, I thought that was interesting. And the reason I asked that is because I've been thinking a lot about this, about heritage and about my family tree and all those things. And this might sound weird to some of you, but I've been thinking about it a lot because I've been involved in 3 memorial services in the last 3 weeks. And you just start thinking about things like, your lineage, your family tree, where you've come from, all those kind of things. And so sitting in those memorial services, I was kind of thinking that. And I was realizing that I really don't know a lot about my ancestries past my grandparents. I don't know much of the story past my grandparents. And I've been thinking about it so much, I actually, I went to a website called Ancestry.com. Have you guys heard of this website? So the idea here is you can pay to go online and sign up and pay, and then you can do research to learn about, your heritage, learn about where you came from, and learn about those things. They claim you can trace back several hundred years from all around the world just very quickly. That's what they claim. And another thing that's popular right now is doing the DNA test, where you take a DNA sample, you send it in, they can tell you a little bit about where you come from, and it's just amazing the tools that we have access to, right, that we haven't had before, where you can do this research, you can learn a bit about your past, and it's fueled this fascination for so many people to do that, to look into that. And so, honestly, I've been intrigued by this, and I'd love to tell you that I went to Ancestry.com and I signed up, and I'd love to be able to tell you that I discovered all these amazing things that I found out about all these amazing things about my family lines, like there's all these famous people or notable heroes or individuals that accomplished great things. I'd love to be able to do that and tell you all that. But although I was intrigued by all of this opportunity, I'm also very cheap. And it costs money to do research. And I just couldn't do it. And I was thinking, well, I wonder if that's a family trait, to be cheap. I was like, I wonder if that's like something I got from, my great-grandparents or something. And this doesn't sound very nice. Maybe I should say they're frugal or they're resourceful, right? Maybe that's the nice way of saying that they're cheap, right? But I was thinking, well, maybe it's their fault. Maybe money was tight, and so my ancestors, they just really were tight with money. And so now that's just a family trait that's been passed down to me. I don't know. I can't do the research because I don't want to pay, so I'll never really be able to connect those dots, but I'm just kidding. But the truth is, all of us have those type of things in our family tree, right? If you think about it, right, we all have those different things that have been passed down to us from our ancestors. Or if you study it, I'm sure you'll quickly find things that you're grateful for, things that you're proud of, but I'm sure you might also find some things that you're not too excited about. And you might find some parts of your family tree you realize that you really don't want to think about or emulate. Now, there might be some great traits, some great attributes from past branches on that family tree that you want to pass down the family line, but then maybe there's not. And I think all of us may find some of that too. For example, I remember talking a few years ago to a gentleman, and he was talking about how his father was an alcoholic and how his grandfather was an alcoholic, and he was passionate. He was determined that wasn't going to be his story. That may have been their story, but that wasn't going to be his story. He was determined, even though he's attached to that tree, to that family line, that wasn't going to go any further in his branch. He was determined. Maybe there's some of those things in your family. Maybe you grew up in a home that, I don't know, wasn't very affectionate or affirming, but you're determined to do things differently. You're saying, I'm going to be intentional, to be affectionate, to speak words of affirmation to my children. My branches may connect to that tree that's not very affectionate, but I'm going to do something different. I'm going to be different. That's not who I'm going to be. Or maybe there's some other things. Maybe there's some tendencies or some habits, or maybe there's some prejudice in the family line that you don't want to continue down your branch of the tree. Now, sure, there's some things maybe you appreciate about your heritage, but maybe there's some stuff you don't. Well, let me tell you about the family tree of a guy named John. John had a brother named James. They were very close. They were a lot alike, a lot of things that were similar. They were close in age. They enjoyed a lot of the same things. They grew up in a home where they learned to be fishermen at a young age. Their dad's name was Zebedee. I'm sure people probably called him Zeb for short. But Zeb taught James and John to fish. And I just kind of imagine there probably wasn't a lot of warmth in the home, though. There wasn't a lot of affection in the home. And so as John got a little older, he began to have this reputation that he was just someone that had a bad temper. He was easily angered, but so were other people in his family, right? That's just kind of how they were in their family. But he was just, he was reactive. He'd get easily angered. You didn't want to say the wrong thing to John because you just never knew what he was going to do, how he was going to overreact, how he was going to get angry. Maybe he'd say some hurtful things. He would threaten you. But that's the way John was, and that's the way James was too. In fact, they were actually given a nickname because of their violent and angry nature. They were given the nickname the Sons of Thunder. Does that sound like a tag team wrestling duo to anybody else? I mean, doesn't it kind of, don't you get that image of just, the tag team, hey, we're just here bringing the thunder, just looking for a fight, Okay, let's take that down. That's disturbing. All right, I just having a little fun there. But the truth is, these sons of thunder, James and John, they're actually disciples of Jesus. They were 2 of the 12 disciples, James and John. John was one of Jesus' closest disciples. It was actually Jesus that gave those brothers that nickname, Sons of Thunder. There's an example of their nature. You can see this nature in John early on as he's following Jesus. You can read about it in Luke chapter 9. I won't go through all the details, but Jesus is with his disciples, and they're traveling. They're going through this region of Samaria, and they need a place to stay. It's getting late, and they just needed a place to crash for the night, but nobody welcomes them in this area. And John sees the way that Jesus is treated, and he gets mad. And he says this to Jesus in Luke 9:54. He says, "Lord, do you want us to call down fire from heaven to destroy them? Is that what you want us to do, Jesus?" And in my head, Jesus responds something like, John, I don't even think you know how to do that, but it's definitely not necessary right here. And in the Bible, you actually read that Jesus rebukes John for that thought. And just a side note, can I say this about Jesus? Jesus wasn't easily offended. He wasn't overly sensitive, right? I mean, when people threw an insult at him, he didn't react in that way. He wasn't overly sensitive. He never got offended. He knew who he was, and he wasn't easily offended. But John sees the way that Jesus is treated here, and he's ready to call down fire from heaven to destroy these people because of the way they treated Jesus. And I tell you all that because it's this son of thunder. That he's the one that's writing this account of Jesus' teaching that we're reading here in John 15. It's this son of thunder that wrote this account about Jesus talking about the abiding life and how we need to stay connected to Jesus no matter what. Our priority is on connection. And to describe this connection, Jesus is teaching, and he's talking about this analogy of vines and branches. And in John 15:5, this has kind of been our anchor verse the last 3 weeks in this passage. Jesus says this, he says, "Yes, I am the vine and you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." And basically what Jesus is telling his disciples is, hey guys, here's what you need to remember. This is what you need to keep in mind. Here's the picture you need to keep in mind. I'm the vine and you're the branches. I'm the vine, you're the branches. And remember that, because no matter what happens, no matter what circumstances you have to deal with, what kind of uncertainty you face, just remember, you are the branch. I'm the vine. You're not the vine, I'm the vine. So you don't need to find strength from within yourself. You don't need to produce your own peace. Jesus is saying, no, that's my job. I'm the vine, you're the branch. Your job is just to hang in there. Your job is just to hang with me. I'll give you what you need. It's your job to stay connected to me. My job is to make sure you have the peace, the joy, the strength that you need for this journey. And it's interesting, when Jesus describes himself this way, back in verse 1, when he says, I am the true grapevine, the true vine, there's a lot. There's a lot behind the scenes that Jesus is saying. I just thought I would point this out, because if you do a little study on this metaphor of vines and vineyards and branches and all those things, if you look at that throughout Scripture, here's what you'll find. In the Old Testament, the vine metaphor was actually used to describe the people of God, the nation of Israel. And it's usually in the context of a rebuke. When God is saying to his people of Israel, you're the vine, but you're not bearing any fruit. You're the vine, but you're not doing what I've called you to do. You're not living up to your calling. You're the vine, but you don't have this fruit happening in your life. And so to the first century Jew, they would be familiar with this symbolic meaning of a vine and a vineyard. But here in John chapter 15, Jesus, he's bringing this different angle to these people he's teaching. He's taking a whole different approach, and I'm sure they were taken back by this. He's saying, I'm changing this up. I'm changing this illustration up. I'm going to flip this metaphor around. I'm the vine, and you're the branch. And I'm sure as the disciples, they hear this, they had to be a little confused. They're like, wait, no, we've always been the vine. That's who we are. We're the vine, right? That's who we're supposed to be. And Jesus is like, no, we're moving this around because you couldn't do it. You guys, as the people of Israel, as the people of God, you could do it. I mean, I appreciate the effort. When you were the vine, though, you just couldn't bear the fruit. You couldn't come up with the fruit that God wanted to see in you and through you. So from now on, I'm the vine and you're the branch. Changing things up. And then he says this. He says, but the good news in me, you're going to bear much fruit. And Jesus shares this teaching and gives this analogy. And I'm sure the disciples, they had to be doing all these mental gymnastics trying to figure this out. Like, this is so different than what we've been taught. This is so different. I can't believe Jesus is saying this. And they're saying, okay. If we're just the branches, what does that mean? What do we do? What are we supposed to do? In this, what are we supposed to do? And Jesus says, well, you just focus on being a branch. Just as a branch, your job is just to stay connected to me. And the same thing is true for us. We're the branches, right? Jesus is the vine to all of us, right? So when the same thing is true to us, our job is to stay connected to the vine because Jesus says you will find what you couldn't find in yourself. He wants to do for each of us what we can't do on our own. He wants to produce in us what we can't seem to produce on our own. When we try to be the vine, we try to take care of ourselves, it just doesn't work really well. Like we're trying to produce that joy, it talks about having joy, and so we're trying to produce that joy. We're trying to produce that peace on our own, and I don't know, we try to do that, so what do? We go look for self-help books. We try to figure out the best practices to apply to our life, and man, we just keep trying, we keep striving. And meanwhile, all the time, Jesus is over there like, no, you're the branch, I'm the vine. What you're looking for, what you're trying to produce in yourself, I can produce in you. Just hang out with me, just connect to me, and it'll happen. I'll produce the joy. You just stay connected to me. Just watch the fruit will grow in your life. And Jesus says, I'm the true vine. You're just the branches. And so that's what we've been talking about in this series. That's what we keep going back to. And I'll just tell you, as I've been studying this, there's a lot that God's been speaking to me personally and sharing with me personally about this connection with him. And if I had to summarize what I feel like God has been telling me, it's this. To be a branch, I need to learn to live out of my identity. So as I've been praying, Lord, teach me to abide. That's the prayer we've been asking you to pray. Lord, teach me to abide. As I've been praying that personally, Lord, teach me to abide. Here's what I feel like the Lord keeps telling me over and over again, bringing me back to the fact that I need to remember who I am. Who I am in him. Another way of putting this is I'm going to find my significance in who I am, not what I do. That's my big ideal for today. If you have that note page there, you want to fill in some blanks. That's my big idea, finding significance in who I am, not what I do. An interesting side note here. When I actually do discover who I am, I start to understand a little bit more about what I'm supposed to do. But I want to find my significance. I want to find my worth. I want to find my identity, not in what I do, but who I am. And just being honest, what I've discovered is that this is an area I need to grow in. When Jesus is teaching his disciples here, he doesn't say to them, hey guys, gather around. I just printed off something for you. I've got a little 5-year strategy for you. So I'm going to hand you guys each one of these. If you guys could just read through this 5-year strategy, and you guys could understand, here's some things that each of you need to accomplish. So make sure you get this, read through this, understand this, because if you do, then you're going to be able to change the world. Right, so here's your task list. Everybody make sure you know your assignment. Make sure you know what you're supposed to be doing. And if we do this, if we all hit the mark, if we all do what we're supposed to do, then we're going to make a difference. That's not at all what Jesus is teaching, is it? He doesn't talk about that. He doesn't give them a task list. He doesn't give them a 5-year strategy. That's not the conversation that Jesus has here. Instead, he just reminds them who they are. He says, you're the branch. Stay connected to me, and we'll figure this out. You're the branch, I'm the vine. Just stay connected to me, and I'll produce in you what you need to change the world. In other words, the priority was on connection, not on production. So, if I could, can I just kind of, let you look behind the curtain of some of the people, some of the circles I run in. You know, I talk to a lot of pastors, a lot of ministers. And over the last year and a half, we've had lots of conversations about things that are happening. And getting to talk to them and chat with them and pray with them, I'm surprised, I guess. Maybe I shouldn't be, but I would say sometimes, early on, I was surprised by how many of them struggled this past season during the pandemic because in-person ministry had diminished. You know, things in ministry had to adjust. And I was amazed how many pastors, so many pastors begin to realize how much their identity, how much their worth was tied up in what they could tangibly produce. I mean, they were still working hard, they were still trying to do things, but so much was taken away from them, and they realized how much they needed to be with people. They needed to see people face to face to feel accomplished. And so when things were shut down for a little bit, they had to figure that out. They had to make an adjustment. They didn't know what to do. Things were taken away from them. And maybe you could relate. Maybe in some way, in some context in your world, you could relate to that, how things changed, how you understood a little bit more about yourself and your identity and your worth and all those things. I mean, I know I could. Working hard, trying to produce, trying to get things done, but the ability to see fruit in large part was taken away from me. I couldn't produce the way that I wanted to or the way I was used to. And what I found was that in me, I have this tendency to determine my worth or my success or my significance by what I could get done, by what I could accomplish. I mean, at the end of the day, I wanted to say, hey, look what I did today. Look what I accomplished. Look what boxes I checked. Look what things I crossed off. But living the branch life means that you have to look at things differently. Let me put it this way. It means that I'm defining success not by what I do, but by who I connect to. Defining success not by what I do, but who I connect to. Not what I do, but who. I don't know if that makes sense. Does it make sense? I'm just telling you what I'm learning, telling you what I'm discovering about myself. We can't make the what too important, and we can't make the who important enough. We'll wear ourselves out if we're trying to define success in life by what we can do, what we can accomplish, what we can get done, and then we neglect remembering who we're connected to. Let me try to give you some examples of this. Try to help with this. Men. Going to talk to the men, the husbands in the house. Some guys sometimes might underestimate the value of connecting with your wife. And you might overestimate the value of producing, being productive. Let me explain it this way. Guys, maybe you come home from work one day and you've got a free evening at home. And so you think, well, maybe I could go on a walk with my wife. I'll enjoy some time with her. I'd really enjoy that. Hopefully she would enjoy that. So you think, well, that's what I'll do. We'll go on a walk together. But then as you're getting ready to suggest that to your wife, you look out the window and you notice the grass needs to be mowed. And lo and behold, it's not raining. And you're like, wow, maybe this is my chance, right? And so you have these choices. You have this choice to make. You have these two paths in front of you, right? You have these two opportunities, right? You could go with connection, or you could go with production. Well, I'm a guy. Since I'm a guy, I have a feeling I know which way many of us husbands would lean to. And no offense, ladies, but I have a feeling lots of men in the room would lean towards production. Why is that? Well, because at the end of the day, we like to be able to say, hey, this is what I accomplished. This is what I did. Look what I did. Be able to say, hey, honey, look out the window. Look, I mowed the grass. I did this. Look what I accomplished. Like, pull out the list and check that off. I wasn't going to check anything off, but now, hey, I got this evening free. I'm going to check this off. Production. Now, cognitively speaking, all the men know that going for a walk with your wife is far more important than mowing the grass. But the problem is, we have this internal struggle. Because, I'll just tell you the truth, this is what it is. Because we feel like going on a walk doesn't really tangibly produce anything. Like there's nothing to show for it. It's not like you have this thing by going on a walk. Like, look at the fruit that's produced from this walk. Look, here it is. Now, mowing the grass, you can see tangibly that you've done something, you've produced something, you've accomplished something because the grass is mowed. But going on a walk, there's nothing there to hold on to. And so, guys, you have the struggle, right? You mow the grass, you produce something, go on a walk, you connect with something, and you don't necessarily see the fruit of that right away. And so we have to have this realization, how often are we putting the value of production over connection? Now, don't get me wrong, we got to get things done, right? We got to do things. Maybe you just need to make some adjustments, is all I'm saying. You know, as a parent, you know, you can do this. It's a Saturday afternoon. Maybe you've got some errands to run, some things you need to do. You can accomplish those errands and make those and get those things done, or you could take your kids to the playground and go swinging or shoot some baskets, right? Again, there's some options there. You have stuff on the list that needs to be checked off, but you could also set the list aside and hang out with the kids. And maybe I'm the only one, but more often than not, my tendency would be go towards production. And why is that? Because at the end of the day, I want to see what I accomplished. If I go to the park, the list doesn't get done. And over again, in these relationships, we can end up putting the value on production rather than connection. Okay, let's talk about this spiritually, right? Because that's the context, right? We're talking about our relationship with Jesus. So we do this even in our relationship with Jesus. I do this even in my relationship with Jesus. Where I put the priority on production, and me, mentally, I think he'll understand the connection. So let me just give you a hypothetical. Let's just throw this out there. I shouldn't admit this as a pastor, but I mean, it's ridiculous in some ways that I would even slip into the cycle, but I'm just telling you, I do it. So just imagine a hypothetical situation. Just imagine this scenario. It's Thursday morning, and I haven't even started on my sermon for Sunday. And I also have a memorial service that I have to prepare for that's happening the same weekend. And so basically in this imaginary scenario, it never happened to me, but I have 2 sermons to write. And really, Thursday is my only day to do it because Friday's full of appointments. Saturday's going to be filled with memorial service stuff. And so I know Thursday is it. I got to write a sermon, a little devotional for a memorial service, and get all that together in this imaginary scenario. So I've got 2 things I got to accomplish that same day. And so what in this imaginary scenario would I do? I would wake up early and head to the office. Like, okay, I'm just going to get more time in. I'm going to start early. And so I come to the office, and I've got a decision to make. Because I could get here and nobody else is here, and I could open my laptop, and in that little bit of time, let's say an hour, I could probably knock out my intro on the sermon, get a rough outline together for the sermon, and feel like I've accomplished something. Or I could do what I normally like to do when I'm getting ready to write a sermon, and that's come into the sanctuary, listen to some worship music, and talk to Jesus for a little bit. And so I have, in this imaginary scenario, I have options. Do I focus on production, getting a rough draft outline, getting the intro done, or do I make time for Jesus? Interesting, huh? Well, I can tell you what, in this imaginary scenario, I would even tell myself is, well, I think I better go for production, and Jesus will understand connection. Because I'm doing stuff for him. I have a choice. What do I do in this hypothetical situation? What should I do? Just being honest, more often than not, I focus on production. Skip over connection. I think he'll understand. But here's the irony here. And I should know by now, if I spend some time in connection, then my productivity is exponential. I heard this analogy once, if I spend an hour digging the well, then when I go to draw water out of it, there's actually water there. But if I just try to draw water out of a well without digging the well, it's a lot more work. Doesn't come nearly as easily. And so I think, I shared an example, a hypothetical situation from somebody that we know. But I think all of us struggle with this connection and production in different ways, different areas of our life. And sure, you can blame society. Everybody's just so driven. They've always got so much to do. There's so many things to accomplish. I've got to keep ahead, stay ahead, get ahead. You could blame it on your upbringing, right? Well, it's just in my family tree. We're just hard workers. That's just what we do. We're good work ethic. But I believe that Jesus wants us to understand the value of connection. Connection first. He's saying, be the branch. Stay connected to me, and I'll bring the production. In me, you'll bear much fruit. And I'll just say it, this is a mindset we have to break. It's this idea of by producing, I connect. I mean, that's kind of messed up. I'll just say it, it's messed up. It's this really broken religious thing that causes unhealthiness in our relationship with Jesus. Like if I think to myself, Jesus is going to look over and say, oh, you've got your sermon done. Now I will connect with you. But Jesus never says those things. He doesn't talk like that. Somehow we think if I impress him enough with this production, then it's going to lead to connection with him. Like we have to earn the right to connect with him. But that's not the gospel way. That's not the truth. That's not how it's done. No, it's connection that leads to production. That's what it means to be a branch. But our tendency is to continually find our worth, our identity in what we do and what we accomplish. And I'll just say, this became clearer to me even the past 3 weeks during these 3 different memorial services. I know I keep bringing this up, but it's just interesting, that moment you're in a memorial service, celebration of life, funeral, whatever you will call it, and there's usually an obituary that's read. And what does the obituary focus on? It focuses on accomplishments, what this person did, what they liked to do, what they accomplished, all those things. That's normal. It's focused on what they were known for. It talks about education or jobs or hobbies or accomplishments. Here's what they did. But I was thinking as I sat in these different memorials the past few weeks, I noticed something that I appreciated. As loved ones, as friends and families would come up and have an opportunity to share stories and remembrances about the person that passed away, I was noting, I was thinking specifically, I was trying to keep track of that. Sure, there was some talk about things that were done, things that were accomplished, but I noticed how much people shared about who the person was. I picked up on that more than I normally do. So for example, they said this person was joyful. They would just seem to be positive all the time. Somebody else they were talking about, and they said, well, this person was just so patient and kind. Another person was talked about how faithful they were, steadfast. Another person was gentle. Another person was loving, and so on and so forth. And I remember yesterday, I'm sitting over there as people are sharing up here about Grandma Lita, and I was reflecting on that, and I was looking at the words that were being used to describe Grandma Lita, and then Carla a few weeks ago, and then another gentleman that we had hosted a service for. And they were describing these wonderful Christians, and they were using all these words. And I was like thinking about the words they were using. I'm like, hey, wait a minute. I've heard those words before. I've heard those things before when they're talking about being joyful and being faithful and being gentle and being loving and being kind and being patient. I was like, I've heard that list before. You know what that list is? Yeah, Galatians chapter 5, the fruit of the Spirit. These things were being produced out of this person's life. These things were on display. These things are that the Spirit of God produces in their life as they abided in Him. And in that moment, I felt so much conviction that these dear saints that had passed on, they were living the branch life really well. And because they were living that branch life really well, the fruit of the Spirit was being produced. These wonderful things were being produced in their life, and that's what was being talked about in their services after they passed. Sure, they accomplished some things. Sure, they did some things. But boy, this is who they were. And I don't think they had to strive to be those things. It just happened. As they lived the branch life, they put connection first and then production. And so that's my challenge for you this week. To measure your success by your connection first, not by what you produce. Measure your success by who, not what. Connection over production. Finding our significance in connection over production. And that's what happened to John. You know? He starts off being a son of thunder, looking for a fight. right? That's who he was. I mean, that's how Jesus talks about him. He's angry, he's got a temper, short fuse, quick to retaliate. And John has an excuse. I mean, that was his family tree. That's the home he grew in. That's where I came from, James. And James is the same way. Jesus, you should know this. You should see. You think I'm bad, but you should see my brother. He's just as bad, you know. And so he's got all these excuses. But then he starts spending time with Jesus. And he spends more and more time with Jesus. It gets to where he doesn't leave Jesus' side. And what happens to John? So much, he spends so much time with Jesus. What happens is things begin to change. And the fruit from his life begins to look differently. How differently does it look? Well, let me tell you just a few things. When Jesus is hanging on the cross and he's worried about his mom, who does Jesus turn to? He turns to John. He says, John, will you take care of my mom? And we would be thinking, what? Really, Jesus? You want the son of thunder to take care of your mom? But John had changed because of his connection to Jesus. The fruit of his life had begun to change, right? Jesus says, I have no problem. I want you. I pick you to take care of my mom. I know you can do it. I've seen the fruit from your life. There's something different about him. He's got a tender side to him now. You want to know how different John was? If you read through his letters in the Bible, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And when you read through those letters that John wrote, you pick up on this theme again and again. And you know what that theme was? Love. 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, it's full of love. John is talking about love. He just loved talking about love. That's all he knew was love at this point in his life. Got to love one another. And so you see this change. Sure, he was connected to this family tree. Sure, there was a lot of anger and bitterness and ugliness, but then he makes this connection to the vine, the true vine, and he starts to produce peace and joy and love. It's interesting, he begins his ministry and he's referred to as a son of thunder, but by the end, you know what he's described as? The one who Jesus loved. I like that. By the way, you know who described him that way? He did. He described himself that way. The one whom Jesus loved. And I think you could make fun of that, like, you know, like was he bragging, talking about, you know, I'm the one that Jesus loved. But I think it was more than that. Because I think what he was saying, he's saying, here's what's true about me. Here's what you really need to know about me. You don't need to worry about where I'm from, what home I grew up in. You don't need to worry about what I've accomplished. Here's what you need to know about me. Jesus loves me. I'm the one who Jesus loved. And he learned to live out of that identity. And that changed everything. So I don't know about your family tree. You know, I don't know about any of that. But I think John would say, listen, it's not about who you've been. Like where you're from. No, that doesn't determine that. What determines is who you're connected to and who you're becoming because of that connection. Be the branch. Connect to Jesus. Let him do for you what you can't do for yourself. You know what they call a branch that's not connected to a tree, not connected to a vine? A stick. Let's not be sticks. Let's be branches. And as we do, we'll be able to define our success not by what we do, but by who we connect to. And as we do, we'll find our significance in who we are, not what we do. Would you stand with me and let me just pray for you. Heavenly Father, we just thank you. We thank you for the relationship that you invite us to. And Lord, I would just say, hey, we all need help with this. So Jesus, help us. Jesus, help us. And I think what John 15 is telling us over and over again is it's speaking to this connection, but it's also just helping us remember how dependent we are on you, Jesus. And personally, I've realized that more than ever, that I'm not self-sufficient. I don't have what it takes on my own. I need you, Jesus. And so, Lord, I just pray that you just help us, even now in these next few minutes, to connect with you. Lord, so many of us, maybe we need to take our eyes off production and put it on connection. And then trust you to produce the fruit that you want to produce in us and through us. So Lord, as we've prayed each week, the last few weeks, Lord, I just pray that you teach us to abide. Teach teach us to abide, to remain in you, to constantly connect with you, to prioritize that relationship with you. Lord, teach us to abide, how to stay connected to you no matter what. And I pray that you would let us find our identity in you, that you would show us how to love and how to live in you. And God, we just want to allow you to be the vine. And we want to do our part by being the branches and hanging in there. Yeah. And Holy Spirit, I just ask you just to just lay on people's hearts, even in this moment, just what this means to them personally. God, I know how you've spoken to me personally through this series. And God, I just ask that you speak that personal word to each one here. What is it that they need to focus on to live the branch life? Lord, we pray that you teach us to abide in you. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord.
I depend on you. I depend on you. Yes, I depend on you. I depend on you. Oh, I depend on you. Yes, I depend on you. I